convoy rolled to a stop. Dust billowed across the windshield as the radio crackled to life, voices tense and urgent. Sergeant Cole leaned out of the lead vehicle, his eyes scanning the ridge 3 kilometers north. Somewhere up there, a sniper had them pinned. 3 vehicles disabled. 2 men bleeding out in the dirt. No one could get a clean shot at the bastard. "We need someone who can reach that ridge," Cole barked into the radio. From the back of the supply truck, a woman in a stained apron stepped into the Afghan sun. She was small, maybe 5'3", with flour on her hands and grease smeared across her forearm. The men barely glanced at her. She was Reyes, the unit cook, the one who made coffee at 0400 and never said much of anything. "Ma'am, get back inside," Cole snapped without looking at her. She didn't move. "Before we go any further, if this story grips you already, hit that subscribe button and follow along to the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel." Maria Reyes had been with the unit for 6 weeks. She kept her head down, served meals on time, and never joined the chatter in the mess tent. The soldiers knew nothing about her except that she made decent scrambled eggs and never complained. She wore no patches, no ribbons, nothing that suggested she'd ever held anything deadlier than a ladle. Her uniform was always clean, but unremarkable. She moved through the compound like a shadow, present but forgettable. What they didn't see were the calluses on her trigger finger, the scar below her left ear where shrapnel had grazed her in Helmand Province, the way her eyes tracked movement across the compound every single morning, cataloging threats before anyone else had finished their coffee, the slight hitch in her left shoulder when she lifted heavy pots, a souvenir from a bullet that had gone clean through in Kandahar, the way she always positioned herself with her back to the wall, even in the mess tent, the way she never, ever turned her back to a door. Cole was still shouting orders when Lieutenant Voss jogged over, sweat pouring down his face. His hands were shaking. The radio in his grip crackled with desperate voices calling for medevac, for air support, for anything that could break the stalemate. "We've got nothing, Sergeant. No angle. That bastard's too high, too far. We'd need a goddamn sniper." "We don't have one," Cole said, his voice tight with frustration. "Closest one is 40 clicks out. Won't make it in time." Reyes stepped closer. Her voice was quiet, almost too quiet to hear over the diesel engines and the distant crack of gunfire echoing off the mountains. "I can take the shot." Cole turned. He looked at her like she'd just asked to pilot the helicopter. "Excuse me?" "I can take the shot," she repeated. Her voice was steady, measured. 4,200 meters. Crosswind from the west at approximately 15 knots. I'll need the Barrett. Voss laughed. It was a short, ugly sound that carried equal parts disbelief and contempt. "Sweetheart, you make toast. Get back in the truck before you get yourself killed." "It's Samatans." She met his eyes and didn't blink. There was something in her gaze that made Voss stop laughing. Something cold and certain that didn't belong in the eyes of a cook. Cole stepped between them. "Ma'am, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but this is a combat situation. I know what you need," Reyes said. Her voice was still calm, still quiet. "You need someone who can compensate for wind drift at extreme range. You need someone who's made this shot before. You need someone who can calculate the Coriolis effect at 4,200 meters. And you need them in the next 3 minutes before that sniper repositions and takes out your medic." The silence stretched. Somewhere behind them, a soldier groaned in pain. Another voice called out for water. The radio crackled with static. Cole's jaw tightened. "You're serious?" "Yes." "You ever fired a rifle before?" She didn't answer. She just walked past him toward the weapons locker, her steps deliberate and unhurried. What Cole didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Maria Reyes had spent 6 years as a naval special warfare sniper. She'd logged 318 confirmed kills across 4 deployments. She'd trained at the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School and graduated top of her class with scores that broke records. She'd made a shot at 4,900 meters in the Hindu Kush that was still classified. A kill that had saved an entire platoon and earned her a commendation she'd never told anyone about. But she didn't talk about that anymore. Not since the IED took her spotter and half her team. Not since she'd spent 3 days in a field hospital watching good men die from wounds she couldn't prevent. Not since she'd walked away from the life that had cost her everything. She'd requested the transfer to support services to disappear. To sleep without seeing faces. To stop being the person who decided who lived and who died. To stop waking up at 300 drenched in sweat, hearing voices that would never answer back. But here, now, with 2 men bleeding and a sniper who wouldn't stop, disappearing wasn't an option. She opened the weapons case and pulled out the Barrett M82A1, 50 caliber, 30 pounds of steel and stopping power. She checked the chamber with practiced efficiency, felt the weight settle into her hands like an old memory she couldn't quite shake. The rifle smelled like gun oil and carbon. Familiar, almost comforting. Voss was behind her now, his voice dripping with disbelief and growing anger. "You don't even know how to load that thing." She loaded it without looking at him. Smooth, practiced, muscle memory from 1,000 repetitions. The magazine slid home with a satisfying click. She racked the charging handle. The sound echoed across the compound. Cole stepped closer. His voice was quieter now, careful, tinged with something that might have been respect or fear. "Who the hell are you?" Reyes didn't answer. She moved to the rear of the supply truck, set the rifle on the tailgate, and dropped into position. The bipod deployed with a metallic snap. The scope came up. Her breathing slowed. The world narrowed to wind speed, air density, barometric pressure, and the target 4 kilometers away. Everything else faded. The voices, the heat, the fear. Through the scope, she found him. A shadow on the ridge, prone position, rifle barrel glinting in the sun. He was good, patient, waiting for someone to make a mistake. She could see the edge of his ghillie suit, the way he'd positioned himself in the rocks for maximum concealment. Professional, experienced, deadly. She adjusted for elevation, compensated for the crosswind, felt her heartbeat slow to 40 beats per minute, the way it always did before a shot. Her breath came in controlled cycles, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The rifle became an extension of her body. Voss was still talking behind her, his voice rising. "This is insane. Cole, we can't let some cook—" "Shut up," Cole said, his voice sharp enough to cut. Reyes found the space between heartbeats, the moment when the body goes perfectly still, when the world stops moving and everything becomes clear. Her instructor's voice echoed in her head from a decade ago. Breathe, focus, trust the math, trust yourself. She exhaled, held it, squeezed. The Barrett roared. The recoil slammed into her shoulder, familiar and brutal, a force that would have knocked an untrained shooter flat. The muzzle flash was blinding. The sound echoed across the valley like thunder, rolling through the mountains and bouncing back from a dozen different angles. 4.2 seconds. That's how long the bullet took to travel 4,200 meters. 4.2 seconds while everyone held their breath, while Cole gripped his radio, while Voss stood frozen, mouth open. Then the radio crackled. "Target down. I say again, target down." Sniper neutralized. Clean hit. Center mass. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to pause. Reyes stood, safed the rifle, and handed it back to Cole. Her hands were steady. Her expression was unreadable. She might have been handing him a kitchen knife. Cole stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Like the woman standing in front of him had just materialized out of thin air. "Who are you?" he asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked back toward the supply truck without saying a word. Voss found her file 2 hours later. It was buried under 3 levels of clearance, flagged with a special operations designation that made his hands shake when he opened it. Chief Petty Officer Maria Reyes, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, 6 deployments, 318 confirmed kills, Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, Purple Heart. Honorable discharge with full commendation. The woman who made their coffee had more combat experience than anyone in the unit. More than Cole. More than the company commander. More than anyone in a 50-mile radius. When he showed Cole the file, the sergeant didn't say a word. He just read it twice, closed the folder carefully, and walked to the supply tent where Reyes was scrubbing pots in silence. The water ran cold over her hands. Steam rose from the sink. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." She didn't look up. "No, you don't." "Why didn't you tell us?" She set the pot down, turned off the water. When she finally looked at him, her eyes were tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Tired in a way that came from carrying too much for too long. "Because I didn't want to be that person anymore." Cole nodded slowly. He didn't push. He understood that some doors, once closed, shouldn't be forced open. He just stood there for a moment, then placed something on the counter beside her. It was a patch. Naval Special Warfare Group. The trident she'd stopped wearing 2 years ago. The symbol she'd buried in a drawer and tried to forget. "You saved 2 lives today," he said. "That person you don't want to be. She's the reason those men are going home to their families." He left before she could respond. Reyes stared at the patch for a long time. She picked it up, felt the weight of it, traced the eagle, the anchor, the trident with her thumb, then she folded it carefully and slipped it into her pocket. She didn't put it on, but she didn't throw it away either. That night, when the camp was quiet and the stars were out, she sat alone on the roof of the supply tent. The wind was cold. The mountains were dark. And for the first time in 2 years, she let herself remember what it felt like to be good at something that mattered, to use skills earned through pain and sacrifice for something other than nightmares, to save lives instead of taking them. Strength isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself or demand recognition. The most dangerous people in any room are the ones who have nothing left to prove. They've already walked through fire. They've already made the choices that break most people. And when the moment comes, when everything is on the line and everyone else is frozen, they don't hesitate. They just do what needs to be done. Quietly, efficiently, without ever asking for credit. That's not weakness. That's power in its purest form, the kind of power that doesn't need a uniform or a rank or a medal to validate it. The kind that simply exists, waiting in silence, until the moment it's needed most.